Edmund Richard Gibson, known as Hoot, was born on August 6, 1892 in Tecuma, Nebraska, to Ida Della Belle Richards and Hiram Jarvis Gibson. Hiram managed a farmers' union store, type of general store, and Hoot had an older brother Leon and sister Jessie, who loved to dance when Hoot was riding horses. Hoot started with a first pony at the age of 2.5. The family moved to Los Angeles when he was 7, rented an apartment downtown, and worked in sales. Hoot earned his nickname as a bicycle messenger for the Al Drug Company, but he claimed it was given another way. You see, when I was a kid at school in Tecuma, that's in Nebraska, by the way, we used to go back in these caves and, look for hoot owls. As a teenager, Hoot grew to a towering 5'9" and ran away to join a circus before working as a cowboy in Wyoming and Colorado. In 1906, he worked at the Miller 101 Ranch in Oklahoma, followed by a 4-year tour with Dick Stanley Bud Atkinson's Wild West Show. By 1910, Hoot's parents divorced, and Hoot was living with Ida and her new husband, F.M. Lewis, in Los Angeles. He was listed as a cowboy on the census, and Hoot made his first film appearance in the 1910 Western Pride of the Range, starring alongside Tom Mix and directed by Francis Boggs. Shotgun Jones came shortly after, a supporting character on the good side of the law. Unfortunately, behind the scenes, Frank Minamatsu, who was a caretaker and janitor on set, murdered Boggs. The story goes, before filming, Frank was smoking and drinking heavily in the garage while firing bullets at an empty gasoline tank. Endangering everyone around him, Frank was quickly fired, although Boggs took him back after an apology. No one knew Frank also had a mental disorder. On October 27, 1911, Boggs met William Seelig and others when Frank barged in shooting. Several cast members, including Tom Sanchi, ran to the room, and Seelig was shot in the arm as he wrestled with Frank. Sanchi and actress Bessie Eden avoid getting hit, but Boggs lay dead before the gun jammed and Frank was knocked out. Apparently, Frank had access to the studio prop room where they kept loaded guns. Hoot heard the tragic news and went back to looking for work. He landed a role in a western called His Only Son and spent a year in Australia on the rodeo and vaudeville circuit. He was also a member of Colonel Stanley's Rough Riders. At age 20, he won the Cowboy Champion of the World title as a bronco buster at the Pendleton Roundup and another award for steer roping at the Calgary Stampede. On September 6, 1913, Hoot married 21-year-old Rose August Wenger, a vaudeville actress, trick rider, and rodeo performer originally from Cleveland, Ohio. She saw her first Wild West show in the summer of 1909 and responded to an ad where she learned to ride for the 101 Ranch Real Wild West show. I was already practicing picking up a handkerchief from the ground at full gallop. When veteran riders told me I could get kicked in the head, I paid no heed. Such things might happen to others, but could never happen to me, I believed. We barnstormed all over the U.S., and the season ended all too soon. Rose worked as an extra and continued performing in rodeos. At the second Los Angeles rodeo, she impressed an investor during the Standing Woman race, who led her on a tour covering all her expenses and splitting the earnings. Rose trained daily with horses at his ranch near Pendleton. When Hoot met her there, they decided to work together and won multiple titles in Salt Lake City, including relay, standing woman race, and trick riding. Sadly, the promoter left town in the middle of the race, leaving them with no prize money. The couple went on to compete in other rodeos that summer and returned to Pendleton just before the roundup. They were having trouble finding accommodations, and a way to get around this was to marry, which prioritized their room. When they did, the landlady gave up her room. So they raised enough earnings to return to Los Angeles, where Hoot worked as an extra and doubled for Tom Mix, and Rose adopted the name Helen Gibson and worked for Selig and Calum Studios in Glendale. Now, Helen became a film star for her role in the 1914 series The Hazards of Helen, while Hoot and Helen initially worked on stunts for the series. He jumped from trains onto horses as Helen doubled for the star Helen Holmes, such as jumping from a station roof onto a moving train in the episode A Girl's Grit. She cleared the jump, but the train's motion caused her to roll to the end of the car. Within a second, she grabbed an air vent before falling. The director loved the intensity of the scene and kept it. It was also the talk of the town, and Helen would go on to replace Holmes as the star. The studio featured Helen in more films as the stunts grew harder. Helen would chase a runaway train by detaching a team of horses, riding them while standing, grabbing a rope hanging from a bridge, and swinging from the horses onto the train as it passed underneath. Undoubtedly, her demand increased, and Universal offered Helen a 3-year contract at $125 a week for 2 reel and 5 reel films. Among these were 2 John Ford films, Rustlers and Gun Law. Many newspapers of the time describe harrowing feats by Helen. A tramp telegrapher beaten unconscious by a pair of crooks is rescued by Helen just in time to save him from death under the wheels of a train. Helen really broke the stereotype of a damsel in distress and is considered the first professional stunt woman. When the United States entered World War I, Hoot worked for Universal and became a non-commissioned officer in the newly formed Army Tank Corps. His registration card states he is married, lives at 1307 Hawthorne, Glendale, California, the location of what is now a Moonlight roller rink, and occupation as actor, Universal Film Company. He supports his wife and mother and lists a few broken bones. Hoot was shipped to France as a sergeant with the American Expeditionary Force. He returned during Christmas 1918 and started his 2-reel contract. Census records for 1920 indicate a big breakup between Hoot and Helen with 2 different addresses. Hoot listed himself as married while Helen was a widow. They divorced shortly after. In the early 1920s, Ford asked Hoot to appear in his film Straight Shooting after liking his role in Knights of the Range with Harry Carey. Hoot's breakout role, Action by John Ford, launched his career as one of the country's leading cowboy actors. On April 20th, 1922, Hoot married vaudeville actress Helen Johnson, and they had a daughter, Louise Charlotte. However, the marriage did not last, and Hoot focused on producing his films under the Universal distributorship. This association with the studio lasted until 1930, when talkies took over. Film titles such as Ridin' Wild, Hit and Run, and Galloping Fury were lighthearted, dramatic, and held an air of comedy. Hoot was the idol of many kids who packed in the Saturday matinees, stamping their feet to the deafening levels as they shouted, "Hoot, hoot, hoot!" The theater ceiling sprinkled down with the piano player whirling as Hoot burst into the scene on his trusted Palomino Goldie. In the 1930s, Hoot was featured in a series of westerns by Allied Pictures. Although successful, he struggled to land leading roles, and competition with singing cowboys left him in circuses and western shows. His finances needed to be in order, and the subsequent failure of marriages left him continually looking for work. It didn't help that in 1933 he was severely injured in a plane crash when racing cowboy buddy Ken Maynard. Deep gashes to his face and serious bruising were costly. He picked up work again for lower budget productions such as Powdered Smoke Range with Harry Carey. It was a who's who's cast of Western silent actors from Bob Steele to Tom Tyler, but this led to work with Ray Corrigan in 1937's The Painted Stallion. Although Hoot had difficulty in the box office, he did receive attention in comics, but still was outsold by Roy Rogers, Tex Ritter, and Gene Autry. More years would go by, and at age 51, Hoot was called back for the Trailblazer series at Monogram Studios. In these westerns, Hoot played a law-abiding marshal alongside Ken Maynard, later Bob Steele and Chief Thundercloud. 11 films were made, and John Ford invited Hoot back for cameos in The Horse Soldiers and Ocean's 11. Hoot's health was declining off the air, and he took odd jobs to pay the increasing health bills, either as a casino greeter in Vegas or selling farm products. On August 23, 1962, Hoot died at the Motion Picture Home and Hospital in Woodland Hills, California, after a long bout with colon cancer. He was buried in the Inglewood Park Cemetery. Sometimes called the Dean of Cowboy Stars, Hoot helped streamline and modernize the Western. With over 200 silent and 75 sound films, Hoot holds many awards, including an induction into the Western Performers Hall of Fame at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. This has been Biographies of the West. My name is Lorin Morgan-Richards. Thanks for watching.